Merry Christmas, my little guzzling gourmets. Well, it's not actually Christmas yet, but we're baking something that is traditionally for Christmas, and you've got to give it at least a couple of weeks to mature. We're going to make a bread. A mature bread. This is almost like a Christmas cake. It's got alcohol in it, fruit, everything like that, but it is essentially a rye bread. We're making a South Tyrolean Christmas Zelten. And I'll tell you a little bit about it, but just before we get started, I'm using the Rye Baker by, what's his name, Stanley Ginsberg. Okay, and this is the first rye bread that I'm going to make from this. I've got a few others lined up. But this is I thought this looked good. Some people call it a cake, and there are some versions that do put egg in it, so it is made more like cake, but this is a bread dough. But it is very much a reduced bread dough. You're just using the bread dough to hold all this fruit and everything else together. So let's get making our Zelten. So there's two stages to our Zelten, and this stage is the evening before I'm going to actually make the loaf and bake it, because we need to create a couple of what he refers to as soakers, a rum soaker and a wine soaker. And we're going to prepare these. So basically you're soaking all your fruit and your nuts in the alcohol. I think like alcohol soaked nuts, isn't there? Especially at Christmas. And we're just going to leave these at room temperature overnight, ready for them putting it all together in the dough tomorrow. So, first thing I'm going to make is my rum, or rather my rum soaker. So for that, you're going to want 500 grams of dried figs. You want 250 grams of raisins and 120 grams of sultanas, and I forgot to buy any sultanas, so I've just made up the difference with raisins. 120 grams of coarse chopped, or fairly coarse chopped, almonds, hazelnuts or walnuts. I've got hazelnuts. You want 120 grams of pine nuts and 70 grams of honey, 56 grams of rum. I'm using dark rum. You can use white rum if you want. Okay, so the first thing I want to do, you're going to want a bowl to mix it all in and soak it all in. So that's my mixing bowl for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by coarsely chopping, and I see there's a few stalks in, we'll get rid of them as well. We're just going to coarsely chop. Actually, I might make them a little bit smaller than that. Now, I should point out, by the way, that the quantities here are based on making 3 loaves. I originally was going to cut it down and make 2 because I was going to give one away. But then I realised that I meant to make it, or like I say, or let it rather mature for a couple of weeks so that it's ready to eat at Christmas. And I wouldn't therefore better taste it. So although if I do taste it, it's not going to have a chance to mature, I thought if I make 3, I've got 1 to keep, 1 to give away, and 1 we can try straight away. Once we baked it, that is. Okay, so this is going to make 3 1.5 pound loaves. And it is a traditional loaf, like I say. This particular one is a variation on a typical Tyrolean Zelten, or Zelten. But they did tend to vary across the valleys of that region. Different families had their slight different twist. Like I say, there's some recipes put eggs in it. but they all essentially are of rye flour, or at least some rye flour in it, yeast, a typical bread dough, but it is enhanced with dried fruits, nuts, some spices. Now we will be adding spices, but we don't bother putting them in at this stage. So here go the nuts. Now, you might have gathered by now, there's not going to be an awful lot of liquid here to soak all this in. Okay. And what I'm going to do actually, I'm just going to put that rum in there just to get rid of some of the last remnants of the honey. But what we're going to attempt to do is just thoroughly mix this as best we can, and then, like I say, we're just going to leave that. I did spill some of my rum as well. We're then going to cover that over, and we're just going to let that all soak together overnight. You want to do at least 10 to 12 hours. So like I said, this bread, some people refer to it as a cake, even though it is actually a bread, even the ones who don't necessarily put eggs in it. And like I say, it's traditionally given at Christmas, or shared at Christmas. There's various differences on exactly when at Christmas, but we'll come to that. But they generally are all shaped a particular way, depending on the person making them. You can shape the loaves into hearts, rounds, ovals, rectangles. Basically, although the basic recipe stays the same, the shape can be anything different, and also we'll decorate it. In our case, we're going to decorate it. I mean, they're all generally given like a honey sort of wash, if you like, but they are also, after they're baked, also generally decorated with whole blanched almonds, glacé cherries, any other kind of dried fruits you want to add. So, I mean, this is all going to go in the mixer and it'll all get mixed in, so it's not too critical. We get everything mixed at this stage, but I'm just going to pat that down. We'll get some cling film over that, and like I say, we'll set that. And don't forget to put your pine nuts in. So I'll get them mixed in now. So the wine soaker is quite simple. For that you want candied peel. Now if you've got separate orange and lemon candied peel, you want 50 grams of each. I've just got mixed sort of citrus peel here, so I've got 100 grams of that going into there. And then I've got some white wine, Pinot Grigio. Where's it gone? Oh, I'm looking for the bottle when it's in the jug. You want 50 grams of that. And we just pour that on that candied peel. Just give it a light. I mean, that's actually got some liquid that you can more or less submerge it in, but anyway. Alcohol's all going to get cooked off anyway once we put it in the oven. So again, we cover it. This is my Rack Master, which you might have seen before, you might not. I have to say, what they say about a Rack Master, it's well worth it. Far better than fanning around with the bloody roll where it all gets stuck or whatever. But anyway, I digress. So that's our second soaker done, and like I say, they are now just going to set to one side. And that, by the way, is my rye starter, which I fed this morning in anticipation of a different rye bread I'm making on a separate run through, if you like. But we're just going to leave our soaking ingredients, and then tomorrow we're going to combine them in to a basic basic bread dough that will contain lemon zest, orange zest, cinnamon, ground cloves, ground nutmeg, and whatever you put in your soakers. And then obviously you want to reserve some nuts or whatever to decorate it. Other than that, that's it for now. So here we are, some 12 odd hours later. Okay, and now I've got my stand mixer out with the dough hook, and we're going to start preparing our dough. Before we do that, we just need to activate the yeast. So I've got 8 grams of dried yeast here and 255 grams of warm water that's at about 40 degrees, no more. Okay, and we're just going to give that a little mix together, and then we're just going to set that to one side just to get it going. Now, I said to you, it's quite a sort of sparse dough making up this Zelten, okay, and it's primarily rye flour. So I've got here 150 grams of rye flour, and then because the gluten isn't quite as strong in that, we supplement it with 100 grams of plain flour. Okay, doesn't necessarily have to be bread flour. Okay, we want some sugar. So again, just plain old sugar. I've got there 25 grams of that. That's going in. And then I've got some salt. How much salt did I have? 14 grams of salt. And now we're going to start adding some of our spices. Now at this stage, now I've had to change things slightly. What you should have is 3 grams of ground fennel seeds and 3 grams of ground anise. And I thought I had some anise and I haven't. So what I've done is I've got 6 grams of ground fennel seeds. The other spices go in a bit later. So I've got my yeast and water, oil. So plain old vegetable oil. How much have I got of that? I'm trying to read from the book here. Got a bit of glare on it. Lost my oil, lost my oil, lost my oil. 14 grams of that. So like I say, you're going to add in some other spices. We're going to add in our rum fruit nut mix, our wine citrus peel mix, and then we're adding in 3 grams of lemon zest, 3 grams of orange zest, which I've got in there together. Zesting the way I did, I've got the oils everywhere. And then our 3 spices, we've got ground cloves, 1 gram. We've got ground nutmeg, 1 gram. And then we've got 3 grams of ground cinnamon. I think that then is everything that's going into here. So I'm just going to give my yeast a little bit longer, and then we'll get preparing the dough before we add the other stuff. So in goes our, whoops, a little bit of yeast stuck in the bottom there. That's not good, is it? In that goes, and now we just put it on the dough hook on. Find the old wood in, and we're now just going to mix that together for sort of 6 to 8 minutes, according to old Stanley, on a low to medium speed. it is going to be a very sticky dough at this stage, okay? It is very wet, and actually the dough hook isn't really doing a lot of this stage, so it will need quite a bit of regular just scraping just to get it all to mix together. And then he says you're essentially finding it's sort of sticking all around the sides, and then you'll be ready to add the next bit. So that's had just over 8 minutes. I had about 4 scrape downs. Initially there's so little in there, it's not binding together, so a good scrape down, get a good mix together, and then it all obviously starts coming together. So now we add in these remaining spices along with that zest, and now we're just going to put that back on again just to get them all mixed in for about another 3 minutes. Now at the end of that we're just going to then cover the bowl and leave it at room temperature until it's sort of doubled up. So it's going to be at least an hour, possibly an hour and a half. Okay, so once I've got that mixed in, we'll do that resting stage, and then we'll come back to when we add in final soakers. Right, so we've come to the end. I'll give it 75 minutes. I've got a baking tray here with some parchment paper or baking paper on it or whatever. Now we're going to divide this up eventually into 3 loaves, and he seems to think we'll get 3 on there, but we'll see what it's like. So I've got my oven on, preheating up to 170. Okay, and then I've just made like a wash, a sugary or honey wash. Is 56 grams of warm water and 42 grams of honey. I'll just mix that together, and I've got my pastry brush ready. Now also, like I said to you, they tended to decorate them. So we've got some blanched almonds and I've got some glacé cherries. Now, the origins of this cake, believed to come back to at least the 18th century in a manuscript that's preserved to this day in the library of Rivereto. Oh, I'll probably say that wrong. And they refer to a Saltino or Saltino, which is a little bit like the Zelten in a way, the way they pronounced it anyway. And I'm going to read you the original recipe, which was take some Candia grapes, raisins, pine nuts, peeled almonds, cut long and minutely cut lemon peel, aniseed seeds, candied citron, cinnamon powder, a little sugar and some little flour. Mix everything together. Take a small piece of brewer's yeast the size of a walnut. So essentially almost all the things we've talked about. So, you know, this has been around quite a long time. So I'm going to check my oven temperature, see if that's up to temperature, and then we'll get doing all the final mixing. So in we go with our wine soaker, and even though that is a very sort of wet, sticky dough, all the liquid goes in there. And now I'll loosen it up a little bit to help get that in there. And then we're just going to combine this all on a slow speed until we've got it all nicely combined together, which is going to be quite something, I think. Let's see how we do. You're going to want a little bit of flour for dusting. So I've got my rye flour out there. And like I say, everything else is there, good to go. So just get this mixing together. So it's beginning to sort of mix in with that dough. I might have to do a bit of a scrape down in a minute, but it's sort of getting there itself. Now I said to you this is a Christmas bread or Christmas cake as such. There are slight variations on when you prepared it or when you ate it. well, like I said, they almost all require you to store the cake for a couple of weeks to let it mature, but the actual date you ate it was slightly different. So one tradition was you prepared this on December the 13th, and then you ate it, if you like, during the Christmas holidays. Another time it was prepared on the day of the winter solstice, and all the family members were involved, particularly the women and the young, possibly unmarried women at the time. And if that was the case, that young woman would dedicate this cake to her fiance. There is a big connection with this cake with the theme of love. And that goes with yet another tradition, a different date. Right, I'm just going to give this a bit of a scrape down, and that was to coincide with the Saint's Day, St. Thomas. St. Thomas was a patron saint of love, and the whole idea was if they made this cake on the 21st of December, which was his day, it would invoke the saint to bring love into their lives. Before baking the cake, the mother, having prepared it, would mark the centre or the top of the cake with a cross and bless it, and then once it was ready, the Zelten was again then blessed and placed in the cupboard to be eaten according to that same tradition by the whole family. They would share it together after they attended midnight mass. Another one varied it slightly and said it would be eaten on the 12th night. So all basically around about Christmas. A lot of it all about sharing. But there you go. So that's going to need another little bit of a... It has now started to combine. It is looking more like a dough. It's going to be a very wet, sticking dough. I tell you. But it's going to need quite a bit of scraping and mixing. This is going to be a rather sticky mess. Now, I'm going to turn this out and flour my surface, because it, like I say, it doesn't very much look like the kind of mix you would expect for a Christmas cake. What I want to do is get it. Now you could do it by weight. He's suggesting that you should, well, if you divide it up by weight, how much is it? 630 grams by weight. But I'm gonna do it by eye. Doesn't really matter that much so long as they're sort of equal size. I also suspect we're not going to be able to. I think I might make that one a little bit bigger. That will do. I also suspect that I might not get all three on there. Although having said that, he's suggesting that you make each one into a loaf about 20 centimetres long, which is a little bit shy of the width of my thing, and 10 centimetres wide. That ain't going to be 10 centimetres, I don't think. It might do. But bear in mind, you don't have to do it that shape. Like I said, these things were often shaped by the family member making it. So I'm just going to get these on there. Now you do need to leave about an inch between them. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure I'm going to be able to cook all three at once. But we'll see. So let me see how I get on. So now we're going to do some garnishing, and what I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to put a glacé cherry and then sort of make some little rosettes, if you like, around each one. And then if you want to add in extra cherries, so I think given the size of these we can go for 2 rosettes, and then perhaps just a well, not a sprinkling, but some random almonds and cherries. So I'm just going to finish decorating them then, and then the final stage before we do the baking is the wash. So that's the decoration done, and now we're just going to brush it over with this honey wash. You might want to make sure that you press the almonds down in, because otherwise, like you've just seen, they might come loose. So where does the word Zelten come from? Well, it's spelt with a Z, it's Germanic, and it sort of translates as like occasional or seldom, and that's part of the fact that it's not baked all the time. It's only really baked at Christmas time. So I'm just going to finish this off, and then, like I say, we're popping it in that fan oven at 170, and then we're going to bake it for about 40 to 45 minutes on it. So you want the outside to start looking brown. Now we've got some wash left over. This is going to make a right bloody mess to clean that tray up, I bet you. We're going to bake for about 40-45 minutes, basically until it's sort of gone sort of brown on the outside, and we can check the temperature inside, where it wants to be up to 92. So we'll see you when we baked it. So here they are, straight out of the oven. I actually gave them about another 10-15 minutes, so I gave them 40. The book says between 40 and 45 minutes till they go a light brown colour. There was a bit of leakage of the wash. And the internal temperature is up to at least 92. Well, after 40 minutes, they were sort of browning. The almonds hadn't quite browned as much as they have here, but the internal temperature was below 80. So I gave them another 10, and then I gave them another 5, I think it was. So the almonds have cooled slightly, and I did actually at that point, before I put them back in again for a bit longer, I gave them another quick wash over with that last of that wash. So now these need to cool completely. Now, you're not meant to eat these for at least 2 weeks. When they cool completely, and you need to make sure they are completely cooled, wrap them up in cling film, store them away. However, I think one of them might get tasted once it's cool. Just bear in mind there's a lot of fruit in that, a lot of big bits of fruit. You know, they're going to be holding that heat, so we'll see you when we come to tasting. By the way, you would normally have this with a glass of wine or something similar, because it is Christmas, isn't it? So here we are. I think this is cold. We'll find out if it can't go on the outside, but it's very sticky, obviously because of all that wash on it. So let's just take the end off. So it is, as you'd expect probably, very dense because it's just so packed full of fruit in that bit. Very moist. Outside is a bit tough, that is the end bit, so it is a bit more overcooked. But I did very much like eating a fruit cake, but not quite. There's a lot of figs in this, and the figs are the overwhelming, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but they're the most dominant flavour. But it is very nice. You're getting a bit of rum flavour through. Sweetness from the fruit, not just from the honey on the outside. My nuts were quite finely chopped, so you don't get that quite the same nutty texture. But there you go. Your South Tyrolean, I can't say it now. Your Italian Christmas Zelten.